Howard Schultz did not found Starbucks. Say that out loud to most people and watch their face change. For 40 years, the story has gone the other way. The scrappy kid from a Brooklyn housing project builds a coffee empire from nothing, gets pushed out by the suits, and then buys his own company back. It's the kind of story America loves. It's on magazine covers, it's in business school case studies. It's also not what happened. The real story is stranger, and it says something about how badly we want our companies to have a hero, even when the truth is messier and honestly more interesting.
Here's what's interesting. The man everyone calls the founder was actually the fourth person to walk through Starbucks store. And the two men who really built it, they didn't want an empire. They wanted to sell you a bag of coffee beans and send you home. So let's go back. March 30th, 1971, Seattle. Three friends, Jerry Baldwin, Zev Siegel, and Gordon Boker, open a small shop at 2000 Western Avenue. They're not businessmen chasing an empire. They're coffee purists, inspired by a roaster named Alfred Peet, and their whole philosophy is simple.
Sell the best beans. Nothing else. No espresso drinks, no lattes, no cups with your name misspelled on them. Just whole beans, sold with the seriousness of people who genuinely loved the product. That store moves to Pike Place in 1976, and for a decade, that's the whole company. A regional bean shop with a loyal following and no interest in becoming anything bigger. Then, in 1981, a salesman from Brooklyn walks in.
His name is Howard Schultz, and he doesn't work there yet. He's just noticed something. Small Seattle account, ordering way more drip coffee makers than it should. Curious, he flies out to see why. He spends a year lobbying for a job. A full year. Finally, in September 1982, they hire him. Director of Retail Operations and Marketing. An employee. Not a founder, not an owner. An employee. 4 years after the doors first opened. And then, in 1983, everything changes for him. Not for Starbucks yet, for him.
He travels to Milan on a buying trip, and he walks into an Italian espresso bar. And something clicks. He sees baristas who know regulars by name. He sees strangers standing shoulder to shoulder, talking, lingering. He sees a third place, not home, not work, somewhere in between, built entirely around a shared ritual. He comes back to Seattle electric with the idea, this is what Starbucks should be. And the founders say no.
They let him test it, a small espresso pilot inside one existing store in the spring of 1984. It works well, and they still say no. Expanding into drinks isn't the business they wanted to run. They wanted to sell beans. So in late 1985, Schultz walks away. Not fired, not pushed out, he resigns. And here's the detail that gets erased from the legend almost every single time. Starbucks itself invests $150,000 into his new venture. Founder Jerry Baldwin joins the board of Schultz's competing company. They help him build the thing they didn't want to build themselves. He calls it Il Giornale. It opens in April 1986, and it grows.
2 years later, in March 1987, the original founders decide they're done. They want to focus on their real love, a roasting company called Peet's. So they put Starbucks up for sale. The 6 stores, the roasting plant, the name itself. Schultz wants it. He needs $3.8 million he doesn't have. A prominent Seattle attorney named Bill Gates Sr., yes, that Bill Gates' father, helps him raise it. In August 1987, Howard Schultz buys Starbucks. Not buys it back. He'd never owned a share of it in his life. This is the very first time his name is on the deed. The employee becomes the owner. The rejected idea becomes the whole company.
Let that sink in for a second. The version of Starbucks that conquered the world was the version its own founders turned down. Now here's why this matters beyond old Seattle history. Starbucks went public in 1992. Schultz stepped down as CEO in 2000. And what followed is the part of the pattern nobody talks about, because it happened 3 separate times. Every time Schultz leaves, the company drifts. Every time it drifts, the board calls him back.
By January 2008, the stock had collapsed nearly 80% in 2.5 years.
the board removed his successor and reinstalled Schultz. His first move as returning CEO was almost theatrical. On February 26, 2008, he shut down roughly 7,100 U.S. stores, all at once for 3.5 hours, to retrain 135,000 baristas on how to properly pull a shot of espresso. Think about the confidence that takes, closing a global retail chain mid-afternoon to teach people coffee again. He left again in 2017, and the cracks reappeared, though not the same ones as before.
The Howard Schultz founder. In April 2018, 2 black men were arrested inside a Philadelphia Starbucks while waiting for a friend. They hadn't ordered anything yet. The video spread everywhere, and within weeks, the company made an extraordinary move, shutting down 8,000 U.S. stores for a single afternoon on May 29, 2018, just to run bias training for every employee in the country. Then, starting around 2021, something even bigger began. Baristas, not executives, not analysts, actual baristas started organizing under a union called Workers United. Store by store, the movement spread. Over 500 locations would eventually vote to unionize.
Schultz came back a third time in 2022, this time for a symbolic $1 salary, largely to fight that unionization effort. A company that calls its workers partners, that built its image on generous healthcare and tuition coverage, found itself locked in open conflict with the very people making the coffee. So here's a question worth sitting with. Can a company genuinely believe it treats people well while actively resisting their right to organize? Or is that just what every large company tells itself? He handed the company to Laxman Narasimhan in 2023. 17 months later, the board fired him. And this time, they didn't call Schultz. For the first time in nearly 40 years, Starbucks looked outside the family entirely and hired Brian Niccol, the executive who turned Chipotle around, for a compensation package worth $97.8 million. Niccol's strategy is blunt. Fewer slogans, more mechanics. $500 million poured into labor hours under what they call the Green Apron Service model. More staff, more hands, less waiting. Over 1,000 stores physically remodeled, adding back roughly 25,000 seats the company had quietly removed over the years in the name of speed. Food availability pushed up to 99% by fixing a supply chain that had been quietly failing customers for months. And in a move that would have been unthinkable under Schultz's founder-first branding, Niccol sold a 60% stake in the entire Chinese business to a firm called Boyu Capital, trading control for cash and simplicity. And in March 2026, Niccol overhauled the loyalty program itself, a change that frustrated a lot of regular customers, but by the numbers, worked. Operating margins climbed, comparable sales rose nearly 8%. For the first time in decades, Starbucks isn't being saved by a founder, it's being run like a company. Now think about what that actually means. For you, not just for a coffee chain. Every big brand you trust has an origin story, and more often than you'd guess, that story has been smoothed out, simplified, turned into a myth. Because the myth is easier to sell than the truth. The scrappy founder who beat the system, the comeback king. It's a good story, it's just usually not an accurate one. And the real lesson underneath Starbucks isn't really about coffee at all. It's about how long an organization can lean on one person's charisma before it has to learn to stand on its own. Somewhere in Seattle, there's still a small sign at 1912 Pike Place, where people line up for a coffee chain that now spans the globe.
Most of them have never heard of Jerry Baldwin or Zev Siegel or Gordon Bowker. They know one name. Maybe that's the real story here. Not who built something, but who gets remembered for it. If you found this deep dive into the myths behind the brands we trust worthwhile, consider subscribing. There are more stories like this one, the true histories hiding behind the versions we've all been told.